What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to the show today. It is July 1st, 2011. We're out of June. We're into July. We're on the doorway of the Independence Day holiday weekend. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today, including Independence Day and some of its history, better known, maybe a little bit lesser known. The phone lines are open, 877-342-6673, 877-342-6673. Brett's in the control room, twiddling the dials and answering the phones when you call on in. I'm not going to read the entire Declaration of Independence to you. I'm sure that somewhere during this weekend you probably will, or at least you ought to, go out and read the document, because that is so critical to what is going on today. We're basically back in that same situation of tyranny and serfdom that we were in 1776. And I just want to read this one sentence out of the document. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Declaration of Independence. What do we mean when we say despotism? Are we talking about a king? Yeah, in 1776, certainly. But we could also be talking about a Congress that gets together and votes themselves rich on the backs of the people and doesn't listen to anybody except during election years, and maybe not even during that. Despots come in all shapes and sizes, and from generation to generation, they will disguise themselves. Our TV shows and our movies will show us portrayals of tyranny and liberation as they existed in older times, so that we will look and say, oh, that's what slavery is, that's what despotism is, but I don't see that here around me, therefore I must be a free person. No, not necessarily. You may just be under a different kind of despotism, one that's designed to not be immediately obvious, one that hides behind the movies and TV shows that portray tyranny and slavery and despotism in a certain extreme way, in order that the ruling class can say, see, we don't have that here and now, therefore you must be free, and we must be a kind, good, and benevolent government. But we can see before our eyes that's definitely not the case here. All right, we'll probably talk a little bit more about the Declaration of Independence and Independence Day a little bit later in the show. I kind of want to get into some of the other news that's coming around here. Up at Mount Rainier in Washington State, and it's a beautiful place. My wife and I lived there before we moved here to Hawaii. Parts of the Mount Rainier National Park are still closed due to snow. And this is the start of July. And yes, there's always a little bit of snow up there through the summer because of how high the mountain is, but this is really excessive record snow. And worse, the record snow is kicking off avalanches as it starts to melt here in the July heat, and that in turn has apparently triggered a rash of rock falls. So it's becoming a very, very dangerous place. But there, like the Sunrise area apparently is either still closed or not going to be open until later in the weekend. And they're trying to get at it because it's big tourism dollars and everything like that. Now, down in Brazil, and yeah, it's below the equator, but it's a tropical country, they've been hit with a freak cold snap that has brought snow to areas of the country that just never get it. Just never, ever, ever get it. And still, the Carbonazis are out there. I'm still getting email being sent to me saying, well, just because it's snowing all over the place doesn't mean the world isn't getting warmer on average. Trust us, it may be cold where you are, but it's warm everywhere else. That's the mantra. Here in the United States, we're getting articles about, yeah, maybe there's record snow in the Tetons, but trust us, it's warm everywhere else in the Northern Hemisphere. And over in Europe, they're saying, yeah, we may have record snow in the Alps, but trust us, it's warm everywhere else in the Northern Hemisphere. And over in China, they're saying, yeah, there may be record snow up there in your mountains over there, but trust us, it's warm everywhere else. It's the same hoax everywhere. Folks, it's not cold in just a couple of places. It's cold everywhere relative to past times. The temperature is going down. And the Carbonazis, they have invested so much time and money and ego and vanity into this thing. They still can't let go. They don't want to admit that they were wrong. They don't want to give up their dreams of billions of dollars of your money flowing into their pockets because of something that happens naturally. In fact, I got an email just before airtime which says, oh, no, we don't call it global warming anymore. It's climate change. I said, yeah, the climate does change. It always has, it always will. And I don't need some politicians coming in and screaming it's a crisis and demanding money and obedience over something that is supposed to happen. But that's the way our government operates. They basically take something and declare it to be a crisis and then charge us a fee to find a solution. But when the real disasters happen, like the wildfires, the tornadoes, the flooding, the Gulf oil disaster, they run around flapping their arms and saying, how could this happen? How could this happen? And they can't do a thing about it, so they pretend it's not important. In fact, we're just getting this story out of The Guardian in Great Britain about how the governments and okay, I'm getting some feedback here. Is the phone line open? Okay, Meat Dog in Germantown on the phone. Are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes. Hey,
okay,
thanks for taking my call. Thanks for taking my call. You have one of the greatest websites on the internet. It's my go-to site at least 2 or 3 times a day. And of course, you got a great radio program. And I'm a news junkie, and I thought I would bring a article to your attention that, with your voluminous knowledge, you may have missed. And maybe I can preface it a little bit. I don't know if you've ever heard, and I can't document this, but you may have heard how World Vision Ministries is a CIA front religious group. Have you heard about that?
Well, I've heard of a lot of religious groups that are fronts for the Central Intelligence Agency. They were using churches as fronts all the way back to World War II when it was the OSI. Could very well be. I really don't know one way or the other. I haven't been paying that much attention to the ministries.
And Jim Jones was the CIA thing too, but I just thought I'd just throw that in there in the mix. This article, it's from theblaze.com, and the FBI invites a virulent Westboro Baptist Church to assist in counterterrorism training program. So you have the unctuous Westboro Baptist Church actually getting paid by the FBI to instruct them on counterterrorism training. And the Westboro Baptist Church from the get-go stunk. I always thought that it was a CIA operation.
Okay, can we slow down here for a second, because I want to respond to what you're saying here. It is no secret that governments will use churches to control the people and propagandize them. We know back during this whole faith-based initiative situation where government money was being given to churches supposedly for social programs, and it basically amounted to a bribe, along with those very generous tax credits, to churches to go out there and sell the pro-war agenda. That's why we have so much of the push for these wars in the Middle East are being sold on religious mythologies. Holy crusades. George Bush was using that very phrase, Holy Crusade. They were posing for pictures with the seal of the president behind their head, so they looked like a medieval icon painting. And, we always see the pastors up there saying, yes, we've got to go slay the heathen. And Michelle Bachmann out there saying that God will curse America if we turn our backs on Israel. So, yeah, they're using the God gambit to manipulate the people to support the war. There's nothing new in that at all. And, it's been going on all along. It's one of the ways in which organized commercial religion has very much failed the people, along with that whole molestation scandal thing.
Yeah, thank you. I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said. And this article just confirms my intuition or my innate suspicion about the Westboro Baptist Church, because it didn't make any sense whatsoever what they were doing. And I personally think it's a government op to discredit Christianity and to lower the morale of the people. And on a broader issue too, what you mentioned is true.
I don't think it's designed to discredit Christianity. The antics of the clergy themselves are already doing that, because the CIA, if they've set up this front operation to manipulate Christians with, they're not going to turn around and destroy the credibility of their own front group. That's counterproductive. Okay, so it very well could be an intelligence operation. I'm not saying that it isn't, but whatever its purpose is, it's not to discredit its own credibility because it stops being effective at that point. And again, that's counterproductive. Okay?
Well, I see your point. But I think that these groups they serve a purpose, and if they can sow dissension among the citizenry, I think that's part of their plan. And on a broader issue,
well, I mean, if you want to talk about discrediting the Christians, I mean, you've got this whole church sex scandal, which is primarily but not exclusively a Catholic problem. We're finding examples of all the churches. I mean, if you want to talk about destroying the credibility of Christianity, that's it right there, and there's nothing this other church can do. We got to let you go. We got to take a commercial break. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I want to get back to this whole climate change, Carbonazis situation. They're trying to rebrand is what they're trying to do. None of the predictions of the Carbonazis have come true. Back in 2000, Hadley's CRU, the institution at the center of the whole ClimateGate email scandal where they're writing each other saying, the world isn't getting warmer. We've got to hide this decline in temperatures. We've got to rig the data to sell our point and get it out there. So back in 2000, that institution literally made a prediction in the newspapers that by the year 2010, which was last year, snow would be a thing of the past. They actually said that 10 years ago. And of course, last October, the UK Meteorological Office, Met Office for short, predicted it would be a very mild winter. It was the third year in a row they predicted a very mild winter, and the third year in a row they got it flat out wrong. Record snow all across the northern hemisphere. That's why we've got massive runaway flooding in the United States of America. Massive flooding over in China. They're having a terrible time with all of this. We still have all this snow up in the Tetons that is only just now beginning to melt. The problem has not gone away. And apparently in southwestern Iowa, one of the levees has broken and collapsed. So now they've got major flooding into all their farmlands. And the reason we've got all this flooding is nobody was prepared to deal with a heavy winter and a heavy spring melt because, after all, Al Gore and the Carbonazis and the corporate media have been saying, oh, don't worry about it. It's a mild winter. We've got global warming. Don't have to worry about that stuff. And every place that anybody listened to these bozos, they got caught off guard. Remember when this last winter started and it was really slamming Great Britain and all the tire stores were running out of snow tires because they had bought this, they drank the global warming Kool-Aid. Going to be a mild winter. We don't need to order as many snow tires. And they ran out. They couldn't get any for a while. Just absurd. So now we've had this a levee breach on the Missouri River. It's already flooded out part of Interstate 29. It's just an incredibly ugly situation up there. Meanwhile, out in New Mexico, we have this problem where the fire is still growing. They don't have it under control yet, and it is now within 2 miles of this Area G, where they have all these 50-gallon drums of radioactive waste, solvents and chemicals and just, the accumulated trash. And there's something like 20 to 30,000 of these drums sitting there in these, basically they're canvas tents. If the fire hits them, the drums will rupture, the chemicals will come out. Most of them are flammable. And even if they're not, just the fire burning will take this debris up into the atmosphere. So the EPA is already out there, doing a radiation watch. They may not tell us what's going on. We already know the fire has burned across some of the areas where nuclear tests were carried out. There's got to be radiation in the soil that's getting sucked up into the atmosphere. But will they tell us? Probably not. We understand from that article in The Guardian that the governments of the major nuclear powers, together with the nuclear industry, basically got together and said, look, the people don't need to know how bad things are. So what if they're growing an extra nose out the, side of their forehead? We'll just blame it on the airport scanners. No, wait. We can't admit the airport scanners are giving them cancer either. So it's just, it's just pretty ugly situation all around. And apparently, within 48 hours of the start of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, the British government was already out there with a deliberate propaganda campaign to say it's no big deal, don't worry anything about it, nuclear power is your friend. And remember what we were getting about how it's, here in the United States of America and colder, radiation's good for you. And Jim Cramer, it won't be another Chernobyl. And we know now that those 3 reactors melted down right at the start, and they weren't telling anybody about it, which I would like to point out is why you come over here to the Jeff Rense Radio Network to find out what is really going on in the world, because you're not going to get it from ABC, CBS, or NBC. They were part of the propaganda campaign to reassure you everything is fine and you can eat radioactive Pacific seafood and stay healthy, just like you can eat oil-soaked seafood from the Gulf of Mexico, and you will stay healthy. Please go on spending your money because these businesses pay taxes. And that's your sole purpose in life, is to work hard and pay taxes to keep the bankers rich. And they're now basically admitting, yeah, they were BSing the people about the severity of the Fukushima disaster. And all along, here in the alternative media, you were getting the straight dope. You were getting the information you needed to have. You weren't getting it from those TV networks. So, basically collusion, conspiracy, actually, and that's absolutely it. When you talk about, big conspiracies to lie to the people, there's one right there. Because when you have governments and nuclear industry and the media getting together and mutually agreeing, yeah, we're going to conceal stuff from the public, that is a conspiracy. So yeah, such wide-ranging conspiracies to mislead the general public do exist. We just exposed another one, along with that whole ClimateGate thing. Now, obviously, a big story for today, if you were following it earlier, is the American aid boat for Gaza, the Audacity of Hope, set sail from Athens heading for Gaza. And initially it looked like they were going to get going because Greek officials were standing on the dock and did not do anything to basically stop them from casting off their lines and heading out to sea. And everybody was really excited. Yes, the Gaza boat is on the way. Well, I guess somebody somewhere made a phone call to the Prime Minister of Greece because they got about 5 miles and a Greek Coast Guard vessel came out, confronted them, pointed guns at them, and there was a little bit of a standoff there. They did not actually physically board and raid the ship, but ultimately the ship did turn back and docked in a different harbor and is now surrounded apparently by barbed wire. So the implications of this are rather complex, and when we come back from these commercials, we'll be talking about that a little bit more. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I've got this little mosquito that is just annoying the heck out of me, and I got to be careful because they have dengue fever out here. Oops, I shouldn't say that. Now the tourism people are going to be angry at me. Speaking of angry at me, I'm still getting emails from the Carbonazis saying, we only mean well. You should agree with us just because we have noble objectives. And, yeah, the road to the dark places are paved with good intentions and lined with sloppy analysis here. I want to get back to the situation over there in Greece, where the Audacity of Hope, this is the ship that has among its leaders Anne Wright, who is a Hawaii resident. She lives here in Honolulu, and she has just been this incredible person going out there around the world talking about, ending the wars and freedom and human rights and human dignity. And and she understands fully well that this starvation blockade by Israel against Gaza is simply a replay of the starvation blockade imposed on West Berlin by the Soviet Union back in 1947. That's all it is. It's designed to starve the people of Gaza into surrendering their elected government, because Hamas did win the election. And Israel said, you can't do that. We didn't give you free elections so you could vote for people we don't like. So they're trying to starve the people into changing their government to something that Israel will approve of. Like the American government. Israel will approve of the American government because they already own it. So this boat basically sailed. They got about 5 miles out to sea, and apparently a phone call was made to the Greek Prime Minister, and a Greek Coast Guard vessel intercepted the ship and escorted it back where it is moored in Greece again, apparently with barbed wire around it now. And I think it's just so wonderful that Greece doesn't seem to have any domestic problems right now that need to be dealt with, that the Prime Minister of Greece and the Coast Guard have all this time on their hand to go out and do Israel's dirty work for them. Because, I mean, I can imagine that if Greece had some problems right now, like hungry people or people upset with the economy or anything, that the Prime Minister's first job would be to take care of his own country and not run around doing Israel's dirty work. So I guess everything must just be all hunky-dory over there in Greece right now. Now, we all understand that the naval forces of a country have certain rights and authorities within their own territorial waters. But under international law, for a government to interdict a ship, it must be in violation of one of the laws, either international law or the law of the territorial waters in which the ship is sitting. In other words, the Prime Minister of Greece does not really have a legal authority to order the Coast Guard to stop that ship if they don't have legal grounds to do so. He can't just do it just because Israel says, don't let them come over here. Because once that ship is out of Greece's territorial waters, its final destination is not the concern of the Greek authorities. They're not allowed to say where ships can go and not go once they're in international waters. That's why they call them international waters. So what we're looking at here is not heroic naval forces of Greece or the Greek Coast Guard. What we're basically looking at here is an act of piracy, or to be most generous, privateers. And the difference between pirates and privateers is privateers are licensed by a government to attack and interdict the shipping of foreign countries. So basically what Greece did today is commit an act of piracy or privateering against a ship of the United States of America. That is an act of war. And one more time, the U.S. government will do nothing about it because all of this is the will of Israel. And just like last year, when Israel boarded U.S. flagged ships in international waters, when they attacked the aid workers, when they murdered a United States citizen in cold blood in international waters, the American government did absolutely nothing about it. A ship represents the sovereign territory of the nation whose flag they fly. They're not putting those banners up on the top of the mast just for decoration. When you are in a ship that flies the flag of the United States of America, that deck is U.S. territory. And the forces of another country may not interfere with that territory. It's just the same as marching across the border, and pointing guns at the American people. It can be construed, ought to be construed as an act of war, especially when there is no legal, legitimate purpose for the interdiction. It simply said, Israel said, don't let them come here. Now, regardless of what happens to the flotilla from this point forward, the damage to Israel is already done, and the damage to the United States of America, and the damage to Greece, to the Greek government, not the people, but the government of Greece. Remember what we said about the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to make them act like one where everybody can see it? Well, it just happened. In the middle of this financial meltdown in Greece, where the police are using these caustic chemicals on the protesters to basically flog them back, to say, you will serve the bankers, you will serve the bankers, whack, 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 you will serve the bankers. And in the midst of all that, the Prime Minister of Greece turns around, bows to Tel Aviv, and sends the Coast Guard out to interdict an American-flagged ship, which has been inspected, is seaworthy. There is no legal reason for Greece to have stopped that ship. They simply did it because Israel told them to. And the Greek people now need to look at that. Because the same thing applies to Greece that applies here in the United States of America. No government can serve two masters. And a government that is serving Israel does not serve our nation, whether that's Greece or the United States of America. This whole exercise with the flotilla is a gigantic planetary litmus test. We're going to dip the little paper into our governments. That little paper is the aid flotilla. and we're dipping it into our government. And if it turns blue, then we know we do not have a government that serves the people of this nation. We are an occupied country. We have a Vichy government that administers the United States or Greece on behalf of a foreign occupying power. And they can get away with that when people don't see it, when they're able to say, oh yeah, this is the American government, and they fly the American flag. But it's not so covert anymore. The American people and the people of Greece are watching their respective governments turn a blind eye to attacks on their own people and their own flagged vessels. So if the Greek people were not already about to fire their government over this austerity thing, they certainly ought to be extraordinarily angry over the issue that in the midst of all of the rioting and austerity and financial crisis, their government still turns around to do Israel's dirty work for them. Who is that government working for? International bankers? Heck yeah. Israel? Obviously. Is it working for the people? I don't think so. We got to take a break here for commercials. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not go down in Gaza tonight.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're finishing up on the situation with the aid flotilla. The story is by no means over. Some of the boats have been sabotaged. Israel is now refusing to deny that they had anything to do with the sabotage of the boats. Apparently somebody somewhere has evidence to the contrary, and they don't want to be gainsayed down the road. So they're basically saying, we're not going to say anything about it one way or the other, which is as good as a confession as far as I'm concerned here. Who else would have a motive to sabotage these boats? I mean, sawing off the propeller on one of them. And by the way, everyone's talking about these two boats that were sabotaged. Remember, there was a third one where they caught these agents in the engine room apparently trying to do damage to the engine. They were surprised in the middle of the process. The agents, presumably Israelis, split. They were not captured, which is a darn shame. And the damage to the engine repaired on a third ship. There are now volunteer posted guards around all the remaining boats to prevent this sort of thing from happening again. But I have one more message here before we take a phone call and move on to other topics, and that is to the government of Greece. Right now, the entire world is watching Greece already because of the way the Greek government is abusing their own people to beat them down, to be willing to sacrifice their hard work and their lifestyle to make the bankers richer, to pay back loans the Greek people never agreed to underwrite to a government that basically operated without any restraint from the people. This seems to be a model that has been happening all over the world. The government will borrow all kinds of money, and the people have nothing to say about it. And when the people run out of money to pay all these bills the government keeps running up, the government starts pounding on the people and saying, how dare you run out of money? Your job is to always come up with more money for us. We need bombs. We need torture chambers. Do you know how much it costs to run a good CIA torture room? And, of course, the debt always piles up higher than the available supply of money, and everybody's just passing that debt around. They're just trying, where do we find, when there's not enough money to pay all the debts, where do we find the money to pay all the debts? The answer is you can't. It's a trap. So, the world is watching Greece on the verge of revolution. And world support for the government of Greece is already very thin indeed. And now that we see the Greek government, which has domestic problems that they should be taking care of, that should be occupying their full attention, but they take time out to go on and take care of Israel's dirty work, that is going to further destroy public support. What little public support is still there for the Greek government is evaporating because of their treachery against this American ship. I know the American media and CNN, and they're trying to run all these polls saying, real Americans stand up and demand the Greek people be forced to pay the bankers, blah, 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 blah. But it's all a crock. This is from the same people who've been telling you all along Fukushima was not a problem, so I wouldn't even bother wasting time with that. But here's the situation. The longer Greece interferes with these ships with no legitimate legal reason to do so other than Israel is demanding it, the worse the Greek government will appear in the eyes of the world. And that means condemnation for Israel's actions against its own people, whose only crime is to stand up and say, we are not going to pay back loans that were made without our permission. That's the only thing the Greek people have done that has the police basically spraying them with these chemicals that makes it impossible to breathe. They might as well be using whips for all the moral justification they have for any of this stuff. So Greece's government is bad and looking worse, and I think it's on the way to collapse. And I think their interference with the aid flotilla may well prove to be the final nail in the coffin of the Greek government. My sympathies are 100% with the flotilla, 100% with the people of Greece, 100% with the people of any nation that is standing up and saying, we are not going to be held slaves by the international bankers any longer, which, by the way, includes Iceland. Iceland has just come out and said, we are not getting tangled up in all of this global banking nonsense anymore. I don't know how they're going to sell a new war of conquest on Iceland, but somewhere down the road, they're going to have to try, I guess. Because those bankers, those money junkies, they can't let go. All right, going to the phones now. Vince in Montana. Aloha. Vince, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. Just a quick report on the snow melt going up from the dams. It's at a full rage. Everyone up here is amazed at how much snow remains on these peaks, even with a week of 90-degree weather. The rivers are all at full capacity. If they're not at record level, they're at the second highest levels they've ever been. And but they're consistently just gushing record amounts of water. I don't know how those dams are going to hold it. And there's just an amazing amount of snow still up here still. 100-degree days are coming, and who knows what's going to happen then. But those dams have got to be stretched to the limits. I see that they are going to stop the spillage for a while at Gavin's Point to inspect the floodgates. The rumors of cracks, they're going to go in there and look at it.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that.
Has called on an inspection, to make sure. I mean, I have to wonder downstream if it was a threat to those nuclear power plants, would they blow all the levees and spread that water out all over Nebraska and Iowa in order to not risk a nuclear power plant,
They very well might, but of course that's going to destroy more farmland, which is going to create more food shortages. I mean, we're in a situation where everything in the country has been stretched to the absolute limit. The safety margins are completely gone. Everything the government does makes the overall situation look worse. They're having to pick the lesser of several evils. There is no good way to move forward. The decades of greed and shortcutting and political corruption have put this nation into a horrible, horrible corner. And even with all letting the levees go and destroying all these towns and everything upstream, it may still not be enough. Apparently the water got under the foundations of the Fort Calhoun plant, and there was a story that radiation has been detected leaking from the building, but again, it's been immediately withdrawn. And, we're back to the same thing. It's okay. We're all happy little mushrooms. Nothing's going wrong,
they've employed the no-fly zones and no photograph zones around it. So that's a sign that something's wrong. But
when there's a no-photograph zone. And there's now a 10-mile mandatory evacuation zone around the nuclear plant. It's not being reported nationally, but ABC Channel 8 in Nebraska reported it. They had the guy from the NRC on video saying, there's a 10-mile evacuation zone around that plant.
Well,
and it's getting no coverage whatsoever.
I wanted to say something about Greece, to the people of Greece. There's been a lot of talk lately about coveting those islands down in the south of Greece. And those islands would be an excellent evacuation point for the people of Israel. Anytime the bankers step in and buy the rights to your land, they'll do just like they did up in the Golan Heights. That land was owned by Rockefeller before when it was under Syrian control, and then the Israelis moved in and took it over. Or not Rockefeller, I'm sorry, Rothschild. The Rothschilds owned the Golan Heights, and then they went in there and took it over so it would be under Israeli law. If you allow the Greek islands to be taken over by the bankers, the next step is annexation for an Israeli recreation center or evacuation point.
Yeah, basically that's what it is. This whole austerity deal is to basically privatize the nation of Greece. And it's going to go across the ultimate goal, if I understand Henry Kissinger correctly, is to turn planet Earth into a single giant corporation where nation states will be no more relevant to everyday life than theocratic states. You know, rule by divine right has gone away. Now rule by law is going to go away, and it's going to be simply the rule by the dollar. And it's no more real than those other forms. It's just manipulating symbols to manipulate the population. But absolutely, the way that these countries were put into debt was a scam. And the people of these nations need to understand that this financial system, this private central bank and debt-based currency was designed right from the start to enslave the people of a nation into debt and transfer the real wealth of the nation, the land, the physical assets, the infrastructure, into the pockets of the bankers so they could rent it back to the very people who built it and paid for it and used to own it. It's a scam. Well, it is a huge scam, and people need to wake up and realize that.
Well, Greece is the closest non-Muslim country to Israel, and the Greeks better think about that because they could end up being the new Palestinians.
They already are. They already are. Their government
I guess they are.
Yeah, their government is already working for Israel's interests, not their own. And yeah, they're being treated like Palestinians. They're being gassed. They're being driven into the poverty ghettos. Get out of our way. We've got all the money now. We want to have nice, comfortable lives. You Greek people who stood up to the bankers, you get out of here. We're going to gas you and drive you down to the subways. And it'll start happening here. We're all Palestinians now. Every government on earth that is doing Israel's bidding sooner or later has to start treating their own people the way Israel treats the Palestinians. Their paranoia will not allow them to do otherwise.
Well, good show, Michael. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. All right. That was Vince from Montana. All right, getting back to Israel. Israel is now violating Lebanon's airspace yet again. They're flying their drones over Lebanon, which is an act of war. When you send your military aircraft into somebody else's country without their permission, that is an act of war. What Israel wants is they're trying to provoke Lebanon into a response that these servile media can then turn around and say, well, look what those gosh darn Lebanese people did. We must go to war to protect Israel. Of course, what Israel wants is the Litani River. We're literally at a stage in human history where we're going to war over fresh water supplies. And as a matter of fact, Israel has already admitted that water was a major motive in at least 2 of their previous wars, including the last invasion of Lebanon. They want that Litani River. Israel wants to invade Arab nations that have more water and bring that water to Israel. They may be already thinking about a huge cross-continent pipeline for water coming from that huge water system that Gaddafi built in Libya. It's an amazing piece of engineering. And it was designed to basically make all of North Africa green. And Israel may be saying, hey, we could use that water over here. Go invade them for us. We're at that stage where we're fighting wars for water, and it's a stupid idea. And I'll get into that a little bit more when we come back from this break for news and commercials. We'll be back in about 7 minutes. Stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this disturbing trend where we're beginning to see more and more countries willing to go to war, not over oil or gold or uranium or anything, but just over supplies of fresh water. And they just want to go and take it from other countries. And that was a big motive for Israel's last invasion into Lebanon, and no doubt is a big part of the reason they're trying to provoke Lebanon into yet another war. They want the water. And they're seeing it as easier and cheaper to simply go take it than to perhaps look for a more intelligent and humane solution. Now, I understand that alternative energy has not worked out as well as people would like. We have problems with windmills. We have problems with solar cells. They're still not efficient. And a lot of what is being sold for green technology turns out to not be very green. They're just using it as an advertising come on. Yes, come on and buy our hybrid car and you'll save lots of gas. And it turns out that unless you drive it really, really slow, that your savings really aren't all that much because you're losing efficiency. Because instead of gasoline driving the wheels, the gasoline is generating power, the power goes to a battery, the battery goes to the electric motor, and you're losing efficiency at every step along the way. Plus, when you add in the greenhouse gases produced by the manufacture of those batteries, it turns out to not be very environmentally friendly at all. So we're getting back to the situation with water wars. Would it not be more prudent and wise leadership, instead of trying to create a war to go and grab the Litani River, to perhaps take that money and that political will and just look for a way to do cheap desalination and water purification? We already know we got a problem with pure water in that our present water technology, processing plant technology can't take pharmaceuticals or chemicals out of the water. And what they're doing is dumping more chemicals in there to keep us kind of tranquilized down, like fluoride, which was supposed to be saving us from tooth problems. It doesn't actually work. It's a mild tranquilizer. And now they're finding out that all the people who spent their entire lives in areas where there's fluoride in the water supply, they're the ones needing knee and hip joint replacement, because it turns out the fluoride attacks the joints in your body. It may be a contributing factor to severe arthritis. Ooh, gee, thanks for giving us that one. Okay, but I digress. We know there's plenty of water on this planet. We just have to clean it up a little bit. And maybe we just need to look for a way of doing large-scale, inexpensive water purification and desalination. And boy, if we hadn't blown that $27 trillion to keep the Wall Street crooks out of prison, we could have put a chunk of that money into developing large-scale, inexpensive desalination technologies, which we could then sell to other countries. Problem solved. We get manufacturing back here in the United States of America, and we reverse the balance of trade, because now we got a cool product nobody else has that we're going to start sending around the world. So I had two ideas, and I'm just going to throw them out there in the hope that maybe somebody will be inspired by them, or maybe they'll come back and say, that's absolute stupidity, it can never work. But while I was thinking about why it wasn't going to work, I came up with this other idea that's going to move the whole discussion forward. And I was thinking about, if I wanted to come up with a system to desalinate water and to take out pharmaceuticals, what's the best way to do it? Well, obviously distillation, but that uses a lot of energy. I said, okay, how about a slightly hybrid approach? And the working title is hydrodistillation or electrodistillation. And it doesn't really matter what we call it. But basically, we've all seen that little experiment in high school chemistry or physics called electrolysis, where you will put electrical current through water, and around one electrode, oxygen bubbles will form, and around the other electrode, hydrogen bubbles will form, where the electricity is tearing the water apart. Well, if you collect that hydrogen and oxygen, and then you put it into a fuel cell that has I think it's platinum catalyst, platinum-covered copper wire catalyst, the hydrogen and oxygen will recombine to form water again, and it will produce electricity. This is the system they used on the Apollo spacecraft going to the moon. They had liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, and they would use it in the fuel cells to generate electricity for the spacecraft, and they'd wind up with clean drinking water. And so the whole idea of this system is electrolysis pulls the hydrogen and oxygen apart into gas. The gas flows up out of the water and junk and salt that's still in the tank. It recombines to water in a fuel cell. That water is clean. And you take the electricity generated by the fuel cell and feed it back into the electrolysis. Yes, you still have to put electricity into it, but it's producing at least a portion of the electricity that it needs to work. And on a large scale, maybe could even be powered by windmills. that might be a way to produce large amounts of clean, fresh water without having to go kill a bunch of people for it. And another idea, and I got this just walking around the local flea market. Have you seen those little feng shui fountains where they have the little mist coming out of them? It turns out the unit that makes that mist is this ultrasonic thing. It's not heating the water. It's not heating the water. It's ultrasonics to vaporize the water. It basically shakes it apart into mist, and the mist comes up, and it's cold. It's not heated. And apparently you get a lot more mist for your electricity with this ultrasonic mister. So my question is, and I may actually go out and buy one of these just to test it out, is that mist coming up out of the liquid, driven by the ultrasonics? How clean is that? Is it going to leave salt behind? Is it going to leave penicillin behind? Could we use these ultrasonic misters that are currently used just for decoration? Could we use those as the basis of an inexpensive, large-scale water purification system? I just want to throw these ideas out there because there has to be a solution. It's just hydrogen and oxygen. Do we really need to start going to war and killing people to have something to drink? I don't think so. I think that's a failure of our entire civilization. We've put men on the moon. We've harnessed atomic power, not too well. We've invented computers. We've got spacecraft already out of the solar system in interstellar space. We can't solve this most basic problem of how to clean up our water and do it cheaply. I refuse to admit that. I refuse to admit failure, because that's what it is. Our most basic living necessity is fresh water, and you're telling me that everybody has given up trying to figure out an inexpensive way to go out into that Pacific Ocean. Right outside my window, down at the bottom of the hill, is all the water we would ever need. We just need a way to take the salt out of it. There's got to be something. And yes, I know there's reverse osmosis, and there's all the stuff the submarines use, which is very expensive. I think at the current price is $15 a gallon is what it comes out to using nuclear submarines to produce fresh water. There has to be a way to make it cheaper. Maybe a way to use a reverse osmosis filter that will work simply with tidal forces. Just have a huge a bay and a gate across the front of it with filters, and when the water flows into the bay, it's automatically fresh. There's got to be something out there. It's probably the most important scientific achievement yet to be found. It's certainly more important than going to the moon. And don't get me wrong, I thought the moon flights were kind of cool. But this is something that could change the world and avoid a lot of wars. So, you amateur scientists, get going out there. There's a problem to be solved. All right, we got, let's see, a caller, John from California. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, happy Friday to you and all the listeners. I just would like to read two quick quotes by our founding fathers in light of the holiday on Monday, just to kind of show and kind of highlight how our criminal traitorous government has just completely abandoned all the principles that this country was founded on. So if you'll give me just a second, I'll just read them. They're pretty quick. The first one is by George Washington. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. That was George Washington. The second one is Thomas Jefferson, and he says, I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. And that could be nothing further from that's just exactly what is going on today. So,
Absolutely.
Just like to quote that real quick in light of the holiday, and you guys have a good one, okay? Take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and I'll respond to you when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right to the phones. We've got Bill Shaw from Florida. Aloha, Bill. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, good evening, Mike, and aloha to all your listeners. Wanted to wish you all a very healthy, happy, and safe 4th of July. and wanted to let you know that Tracy Long and I will be coming on the show next week on Friday evening to discuss the foreclosure crisis as well as unsecured credit. We'll be able to talk about programs involving debt settlement, debt consolidation, and what we think is the best program out there at all, debt dismissal. Tracy and I will be able to take calls and address listeners and go over these programs for approximately an hour. So wanted to let you know that we will be available and on your show next week.
Well, I appreciate that, and I remember when we talked privately earlier this week, and I said the reason I didn't have you on tonight is we're all in the holiday mood and we're all getting ready to go out and have fun, and I didn't want people to lose this information over the holiday weekend. So we're going to have you here next week, and what is really important, you were telling me, and I don't want to go into it at depth now, but just to sort of tease people into making sure that they're going to catch the show.
I want to make sure that the listeners are here next week, ready to call in and to have a boatload of listeners here because we're going to be addressing some very significant issues. And as far as advertising, we are going to go ahead, but because this is legal services, we are going to have to go through compliance on our firm and make sure that everything suits the bar.
Well, no, we understand how that works, but the issue that was really important to me when we were talking, and again, this is to just get people to pay attention and come in here next week, is the revelation that a lot of these credit companies, when they are contacting people, they're actually operating a little bit outside the limits of the laws that are designed to protect consumers.
Just like with the mortgage situation and a mortgage audit, these people are operating outside the law. There are violations of your relationship with your lender. When you sign that credit card application, that is a contract, just like you sign your mortgage. And so when they change your interest rate from 7% to 15% to 27% without you signing off on it, they are in violation of the law. When they decrease your credit limit from $15,000 to $3,000 as agreed to in that initial application, they are in violation of the law. And when they charge you a $25 a month penalty because you're late, it is over $10 a month. They are in violation of the law. And if you do put in a qualified written request or a request for a verification or validation of that mortgage, that should put it into limbo and in suspension. And if they call you on the telephone, on a credit card, if they call you after you put in that request, every one of those violations is worth $1,800. So if they call you 10 times, that bank owes you $18,000, and that should probably pay off your credit card.
That would certainly be a benefit to most of the American people. Anyway, Bill, we're going to spend hour number 2 of next Friday's show right exactly this time. We're going to spend the entire hour on this stuff because when you were telling me this stuff, I said, what more could the bankers and money junkies do to the American people? They've
already been bailed out by the American public, and now they're bending us over the coffee table and having their way with us. And lastly,
very uncomfortable coffee table.
We will also discuss the differences between debt settlement, debt consolidation, and what are the tax ramifications of those versus debt dismissal. And what we're not going to try to do is say, no, we're not going to dispute the fact that you bought that lawnmower at Home Depot for, $200, or your wife went to Macy's and bought that purse or that cardigan sweater for $150. We do not dispute it at that level. We dispute it at the level of the signed contract and what were the original terms of the origination of the agreement between the consumer and the lender.
Okay. All right. Well, Bill,
aloha to everybody. Happy 4th of July, and enjoy yourself out there. And as a patriot and a former Navy veteran and father of a son who is a serving officer, I support all of our troops and wish all Americans a great and very pleasant 4th of July weekend.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Bill. And we definitely are looking forward to you and Tracy being on the show a week from tonight. It's important information. If you're struggling with your credit card bills, if you're getting notices from your credit companies that they're simply upping the rates and upping the fees and everything, They are, in all probability, exceeding their legal rights to do so, and I think it's something that we all need to be paying attention to right now as we struggle to deal with this incredible situation of a financial system that is designed to plunge us into debt and permanently to keep us there. All right, getting back over to the other side of the world here, the United States has extended their drone strikes to Somalia. We're sending these robotic killing machines into something like half a dozen countries right now. We've got 4 official wars, and we're sending these drones into all of these other countries. Now, Pakistan is getting sick and tired of all of this drone nonsense because we seem to be killing more Pakistani civilians than anybody else with the drones. So Pakistan demanded the United States leave the Shamsi Air Base. This is inside Pakistan that the U.S. has been using for these drone attacks into other countries. This is their land. Pakistan owns this airfield. And they said to the United States, you have worn out your welcome. We are rescinding our invitation. Please leave and go home. And the United States, the Obama administration, has said, no, we're not leaving. You can't make us. Now, this is a huge, huge diplomatic crisis because Pakistan could turn around and just shut down all the roads leading into Afghanistan, without which our forces in Afghanistan would be in serious, serious trouble. Now, I don't know why Obama did this. They seem to be pushing everybody to try. Maybe this is their way of justifying an invasion of Pakistan. Only problem, of course, is Pakistan actually does have nuclear weapons of mass destruction. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And it just seems to be that, the U.S. government is just, trying to make more wars. There seems to be their only solution, anything going on. Economy's bad, start a war. Gulf oil disaster, start a war. War's going bad, start another war. And it just goes on and on and on. We've got 4 official wars. We're sending drones into at least 6 countries that we know of. We're garrisoning the entire planet. Now they're trying to provoke Pakistan, while Israel's provoking Lebanon. And both of them are trying to gang up on Syria now. And behind that, of course, will be Iran. How many countries does the United States have to invade before it's recognized it's the new world war? We're in it. And we're losing. And our economy is showing the strains of paying for a new world war that we really couldn't afford in the first place. We've spent more on this so-called war on terror, which is the branding for the new world war. Our government does that. I mean, the Civil War was the war to set men free. Well, that was kind of a side effect. It was really about states' rights versus the growing federal empire. And the states lost. And that was the real issue of the war. Lincoln just used slavery to motivate the Northerners to invade the South and recapture them and bring them back into the tax rolls. So this new one is about the war on terror. And there are no real terrorists out there. They all turn out to be fakes, like Adam Gadon and Yusuf al-Khattab and the rest of these bozos. And we know that very simply because if there were terrorists out there, they'd be perfectly willing to blow up an airport security gate as readily as an airplane, because the end result from the terrorist point of view is exactly the same. People afraid to travel. Of course, people are afraid to travel right now. They don't want to be fondled by the TSA. So that's, the terrorists went home and said, we don't have to do anything. TSA's destroyed America. We don't have to do a thing about it here. Now, over in Athens, Greece, we were talking about this earlier, where in the midst of the Greek government doing Israel's dirty work with regard to the Flotilla, the situation in Athens is just really ugly. There's all kinds of tear gas. There's other chemicals. People aren't really sure what they are. They seem to be experimental, where it makes it very, very difficult to breathe. All kinds of horrible things going on. We've seen the videos coming over. We've put them up at whatreallyhappened.com, where the cops are just going on, just beating on people at random. Just bystanders watching the protest, and the cops turn around and, I saw them whack this one guy on the arm and break the guy's arm, and he hadn't been doing anything. There was just this cop out there with this bloodlust, and he's looking around saying, who can I hit? Who can I hit? Oh, you! Bang! Puts the guy on the ground. It is the brutalization of the Greek people. I'm not even sure the Nazis were as rough on the people of Greece as the current Greek government, because they're pushing this austerity, which is simply meaning you, the people of the world, must agree to live cheaply, because we need the money to go to the bankers. And again, because of the very nature of the banking system and the debt-based currency, it won't help anyway. Greece is still going to collapse. All they can do by pounding on the Greek people and driving them into total starvation and poverty is delay the inevitable. It's still going to collapse. The whole system is going to collapse. What the people of the world need to understand is you've got two choices. You can allow yourself to be dragged down into poverty and starvation and homelessness by your collapsing governments and economy, or you can stand up and say, I'm not throwing any more money into this losing enterprise because it's not going to make any difference in the final outcome. And you can save what you have left and say, I'm not part of this anymore, like they did in Iceland, like they're doing in Greece, like they did in Egypt, like they're about to do in Spain and are starting to do in Great Britain. It is a global revolution. It is a global cry for freedom. It is a global quest for independence. And that word has a very special meaning. The reason we call July 4th Independence Day, as opposed to Liberty Day, or Freedom Day, or Shoot the King's Men Day, is that the push for the American Revolution was fueled by anger over the constant efforts by the British Crown to force the American people, the colonials, to be dependent on the British companies and British banks, to not allow them engage in commerce where they chose to engage, that would be more profitable and beneficial for the colonists. You had to buy your tea from the British East India Company. You had to get your documents stamped by British officials, and there was a tax on that. And because of the Currency Act, you had to use British notes to conduct your business in, not the notes the states were printing for their own use. You had to get your currency from the Bank of England, and they'd be perfectly happy to loan it to you at interest. King George III made the colonies dependent on Britain's banks and Britain's companies, to the detriment of the people. So when the people broke bonds with King George III, they called it Independence Day. We will not be dependent on a government. We will not be dependent on a private central bank. We will not be dependent on any one nation's corporations and commerce for our necessities. We will go our own way. We will make our own deals. We will do what is best for we, the people. And central to that, of course, was this idea that the states would have all the authority and the central government have as little as possible. That government governs best, which governs least. Because they didn't want to be in a situation where people were being forced to be dependent on that central government. And we let that all go away. We're back to the same situation. We're forced to be dependent on the government, whether it's for food stamps or for the currency coming from the private central bank. We're back at the same place this nation was in 1776. A huge, tyrannical, despotic government requiring that we be dependent on their businesses and their banks. Talking about fresh water, it is still the law in the United States of America that you may not collect rainwater on your own property in many of the states and jurisdictions, because you're taking it from the water district, which is going to collect it off of your land and then sell it back to you. They're trying to pass more and more laws against small family farms and raw milk dairies and farmers markets to make it more difficult for them to operate, to make sure that you are dependent on the big multinational food corporations that will fly the lettuce or truck the lettuce from Los Angeles to New York and sell it to you. So that's what independence means. It's not just freedom and it's not just liberty. It is not having to live your life dependent on a central government or a central bank. We got a caller on the line, Rob in Minnesota. Sorry to keep you waiting. Aloha, and what's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Greetings from the or day one of the great anarchist state of Really Sokia, land of 10,000 lakes and even more taxes.
And hey, you've got nothing on Hawaii. We got the highest taxes in the country out here, and we get absolutely nothing for it. You should see our roads. You know, it's amazing. Rob, sorry to do this to you. Can you stay with us through this next commercial break, and we'll go right to you as soon as the commercials are over. Thank you. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Rob in Minnesota. And, Rob, can you just pick up where you left off?
Okay. I just want to briefly touch on this. The reason I called is for your science project, but this is day one of the government shutdown of Really Sokia. They aren't getting enough taxes to pay for everything. So the lawmakers and governors that shut us down today will still receive a paycheck, but anything that actually raised revenue, such as state parks, on the 4th of July weekend, they're shutting those down. Fishing and hunting license, you can't buy any of them. The lottery, they're shutting that down. Although I don't really agree with the lottery, it does raise money, but they're going to shut it down. And
they're basically shutting down all the things the people wanted and keeping their paychecks here. At this point, I think the danger is if they go on too long, the people are going to realize, something? We don't need this government. They're not doing anything except taking money and putting it in their own pockets. I'm going to go out to the parks anyway, whether they're open officially or not. I'm going to go out fishing this weekend. There aren't going to be any rangers to stop me from hunting and fishing, right? So to heck with the license. Go on. Open season.
Absolutely. I slept well this morning. Unfortunately, I can't listen to you like I used to because I'm on a slave yard shift job, and so I can't. I'm not available when you're on. But I'm enjoying today, and I'm enjoying your show as I always did. Anyway, for your science project, the thing that I've thought about for a long, long time. I'm going to just briefly go off on a tangent here. Have you ever, when people blow out the candles on a birthday cake, have you ever seen someone, grab a match and light the trail of smoke, and it goes down and lights the candle?
Yes.
Okay. And I remember seeing somebody that taken an old truck. I've got this in print form someplace, and I'm not sure where it is, but they took an old International Harvester, and they had a wood-burning stove that just smoldered wood, and then they piped the smoke back and forth through, big 3-inch pipes on top of this International Harvester, and then ran it into the engine. So they condensed the smoke into a combustible form, and it fed the engine, and the engine just ran just fine.
Was it a diesel engine?
Practical. What?
Was it a diesel engine?
No, it's a standard gas engine. You condense that unoxygenated smoke to a point where it's where you can feed it into a gas engine, and it burns just fine. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that they used to do during World War II. The farmers used to come up with stuff like this. So, my thing is, and this might sound a little strange, but, we have areas of the country where you have, numerous days of sunshine, not here in Minnesota, but places like Nevada. You have numerous days of sunshine. We have tons of garbage being generated. So why not use a solar concentrator to concentrate the energy on on garbage in an area without a whole lot of oxygen? You gasify it and you pipe it off, and you can run it into turbines or engines or whatever the heck you want to run it with. And another idea is, and I've seen other people say this very same idea, but the Earth is covered with a heck of a lot more surface of water.
Okay, let me cut back in here. We temporarily lost our connection here. The problem with that is garbage is pretty random stuff. And when you heat it, there are going to be chemicals that come out of some of that garbage that are not things you're going to want in the atmosphere. So, at some point, I'm hoping that the robotics revolution will reach a point where robots are so cheap that we can send them into the landfills and the garbage piles, and they can sort out stuff for recycling very cost effectively.
happening already. There's an outfit from Sweden called Mueller Biog, and I went through this 20 years ago. They were going to build an incinerator in our small, in a valley, that's 3 miles wide with 500-foot bluffs, and they were going to burn the garbage in this valley. And I thought it sounded interesting because they were telling me how high tech it was, but there was nothing high tech about it. They were going to add, cigarette filters on top of a big mass burner.
Yeah, it sounds like they were branding it with green. Anyway, listen, I hate to do this to you. I've got one more caller I got to get to, and I've got a couple more comments I want to make before the end of the show here. So I'm going to let you go here. And your idea is interesting, but there are some downsides to it. We'll get back onto this topic next week. So thank you very much for the phone call, Rob. And I want to get a couple of comments in here before we take our final phone call. The news right now is making a huge issue over the fact that Gaddafi, in a speech today to his own supporters in Tripoli, was threatening that if Europe continues to attack Libya, that Libya will find ways to counterattack back at them. And, of course, the media is saying, oh, bad Gaddafi for saying that. First of all, it was domestic consumption. He's trying to rally his own troops and sort of keep them going here. And let's not lose sight of the big picture. Gaddafi has had his country invaded by NATO, by the United States. They're dropping bombs all over the place, including depleted uranium. A leader cannot have that happen to his country and remain entirely cheerful. Now, personally, I think Gaddafi's statements are bluff and bluster, and he cannot carry through on them. But I understand why he's saying it. He's been invaded. He has a right to be a little bit angry about that. All right, last comment before we go back to the phone here. There was a story out here today how the Barack Obama administration is overriding what's called the 2009 Ogden Memo about medical marijuana and is declaring open season on marijuana shops in states where medical marijuana is legal. And yes, the system is being abused. We've all seen the ads, for instant doctors in California. Come on in and I'll give you a prescription for marijuana. And they are taking advantage of the situation. But this is not about marijuana, and it's not about these doctors turning themselves into prescription mills. This is simply the Obama administration trying to manufacture another issue for 2012. He can't run on the economy, can't run on the war, can't run on the handling of the Gulf oil disaster. Gay marriage isn't getting the traction. Nobody cares about the birth certificate anymore. So now we're going to make marijuana legalization the issue for 2012. It's just the way they do politics here. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones. We've got Clint in Las Vegas. Aloha, Clint. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was going to say something else, but now that you brought up what you have, on Alex Jones today, Webster Tarpley called. He's in Tripoli, and he showed a video of the rally there in Tripoli. And it's like Alex said, he goes, this has to be at least 500,000 people. Now you're talking about a country with only 6 million people, these people are obviously, and he's arming the people. That's hardly the sign of a ruthless dictator, is when the dictator's arming the own population. This would be an insane thing to invade this country, and it will be World War III, and I am totally against it. And hey, Mike, just keep doing what you're doing. Oh, one more thing. Could you put that Rick guy who's going to be a guest on next week? Could you put a link of his website up on your website?
I probably will on Tuesday because they just changed who it is that they're working with, and they're having to go through some clearance issues, and I don't want to put an ad up for them until we know for sure that it's in compliance. We're just having to dot our T's and cross our I's and that whole situation. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. The situation in Libya is getting more and more complex. People who were supposedly on the revolutionary side have gone back to supporting Gaddafi because they're seeing what NATO is doing. They're seeing what the United States is doing. They're hearing about all this talk about, you got to have a private central bank and a debt-based currency, and they understand that's really what the issue is all about. Libya is being invaded because they dare to have a state-owned bank and a value-based currency, and that is a huge, huge threat to the private banking cartels of the world. Because once a nation has a value-based currency and the rest of the world sees how well that works for the people, Everybody's going to want it. That's why when Germany adopted a value-based currency to get out of the economic devastation of the private central bank that they were cursed with as part of the Treaty of Versailles, and it started working so well for the German people, it turned the German economy around. Hitler was Time magazine's Man of the Year because of the economic miracle in Germany. But that economic miracle in Germany flew directly into the face of private central banks and debt-based currencies, and that was why the world's bankers tried to boycott Germany and utterly destroy the new economy before other nations realized what a great deal it was and how much better it worked for the people than these Federal Reserve Bank of England type systems. And so Gaddafi dared to do exactly the same, and here we are. He's the bad guy. He's evil. He's raping people. We must go in and kill them and force them into the clutches of a private central bank and a debt-based currency. And that's what's going on over there. And the Libyan people have woken up to that realization, that this is not about Gaddafi and revolution. It's about a clash of banking systems. When you hear the phrase clash of civilizations, that's code speak for a clash of banking systems. Private central banks and debt-based currencies, which make the bankers very rich and the people poor, versus state banks, value-based currencies that are good for the population as a whole. That was what the American Revolution was fought over. Unfortunately, our later governments sold us back into the slavery of private central banks, not once, but 3 times. And here we are, hovering on the edge of collapse and revolution yet again. I saw a story earlier today where you've got people who are like in their 50s having to work as interns, which is the new slavery in the United States of America. Forget about going out and getting a job. You have to go to a business and intern with them for like 6 months, which means you're working for free. You're not being paid. And at the end of the 6 months, they might deign by their leave to give you a job, which basically, they're getting the free labor. I find this idea absolutely appalling. An intern as a learning position, yeah, but that's not what they're being used for. I won't have interns. When I was teaching over at UH Manoa, and they were saying, oh, can we come and intern, at your animation shop? No, you can't. I'll hire you. I'll pay you. I won't have you work for me for free. That's not the American way. That's it for our show. Have a wonderful Independence Day. We'll be back here next Tuesday here on the Rents Radio Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, have a safe 4th of July, and aloha, America.